It is. It's good to be with you, and I've been here a couple times before, and there's nothing any more encouraging to a speaker than being invited back. It's one thing. I was saying to one of our staff one time. I said, "Well, how did your time go?" They said, "Oh, I think it went well." They said they enjoyed it. I said, "Well, that's just they're only being polite unless they ask you back. If they ask you back, they did really enjoy it, and so it's always encouraging to come back." But I've been here enough times that I know a number of you, a lot of your faces are familiar to me, and some of your faces are just unforgettable, but they're all familiar. And so this is a special place for me, and I'm always delighted to be able to be back here because I love the fellowship here and the spirit and just so many of you that I know. I told my father I was coming here. I had lunch with him Wednesday, and he lives just a block from where I live now. My parents will be at the Billy Graham funeral tomorrow. They had it's funny, my mother, about a week ago, she called me and she said, everybody keeps asking us if we're going to Billy Graham's funeral. She said, I haven't even thought about it. I don't know anything much about it, and I don't know why everyone expects that we'll be going. And I said, well, I guess they would assume you might, but that's okay. It's Charlotte, you're in Atlanta, so it'd be a bit of a challenge to get over there. And so, that's fine. Well, about an hour later, we had 2 different calls coming in for the Billy Graham organization. Well, actually, they'd called earlier. We just hadn't checked the voicemail. And we checked, and they've had all these calls coming in. Will Mr. and Mrs. Blackaby be at the funeral? We have tickets. You have to have a ticket to go to that funeral. There's, it's under a tent, kind of commemorating his tent early ministry, and they only have room for 2,300 people under that tent. So they had to limit it to 2,300, and so it's quite an elaborate process. You have to have a very special ticket to get to the funeral, but that's where my parents will be tomorrow. So I thought to myself, I would love to, can you imagine those 2,300 people and the saints gathered under that tent that have made a difference with the kingdom over the years? And so I'm excited for them. My mom was like, well, I don't know if I would, we hadn't even thought about it, we don't know we'd go, and I find out that they have been invited, so I called my mom back. Oh, Mom, just by the way, if anyone asks you if you're going, you can at least tell them you were invited. I said, because apparently you've been invited. We've had 2 different calls wanting to know for sure if you're going to come. And I said, would you be interested in going? And she said, well, of course I would. So that's where they are. Well, I want to share with you kind of a journey, really, in all the times I'm talking with you. I want to share with you a bit of a pilgrimage that I've been on in the last little while. And my father and I, we spent a lot of time trying to help Christians to grow. That's what a lot of our ministry is. Just working with leaders, working with business people, but Christian people, and saying wherever you are right now with God, what would it look like for you to go deeper with God than you've ever gone before? And what a joy just to get to go around the world doing that. But what I found in my own life is that my growth has not been steady. I suspect for many of you, you'd say the same thing. I mean, you'd hope that every day you would just take another giant step forward as a Christian. Just every day you'd become a little more like Jesus. But I'll just tell you the truth. There's been weeks, months, maybe years, where I was essentially the same Christian. I prayed the same way. I had the same level of faith. I may have been serving God, but I was serving the same way, getting the same fruit, the same results. I worried about the same things. I was experiencing defeat over the same things. And then now and then, God would get hold of me. It might be a difficult experience, it might be a crisis, or it might be a good moment, but in that moment, it was like I suddenly went on spiritual steroids and I just shot forward. Have you known that? Like, in fact, if I were to try to trace most of the growth in my Christian life, you could probably find about half a dozen times where God really got me in that sweet spot of spiritual growth, and I just took off. But and so I want to tell you about just kind of an experience I had where one of the last times that really happened for me was about 3 years ago. About 3 years ago right now. And that's 3 years ago when I became a grandfather. Now, I had always heard that being a grandfather, being a grandparent, was a good thing. I had all kinds of people tell me it's better than being a parent and all that. But I just thought, I'm sure it's good, and I'm sure when the time comes, it'll be fine. But like, I've done lots of things in my life. I've traveled, I've written, I've done lots of cool things, and so being a grandparent would just be another one of those cool things. And I vowed that I would not be one of those obnoxious type grandparents you meet on airplanes, that they work into every conversation a description of every one of their grandchildren. And then they pull out like 38 pictures of their 6-year-old grandson's 6-year-old birthday party and bore you to tears. Like, I'm not going to do that. That's not going to be me. But what happened was, about 3 years ago right now, in a matter of 2 weeks, I went from no grandkids to 3 grandsons. I had 3 grandsons in 15 days. Had twins, then a week later, or 2 weeks later, my son Mike had a son. And they all lived right by me at the time, so I was just immersed. No chance to just I always sort of picture just getting to love this one grandchild for a couple of years, and then another one comes along, but just 3, just like that. And I just kind of believe, go big or go home. If you're going to do it, like, be all in. That's kind of my philosophy I've taught my kids. So what happened was that one Saturday morning, I'm just at home, and a lot of weekends I'm gone, so it's always really delightful if I can wake up in my own bed on a Saturday morning. So it's Saturday morning, and I wake up, and I'm just, beginning to move toward the coffee, and all of a sudden the phone rings. It's my son. Dad, the twins are on their way. They're coming today. You're going to be a grandfather today. Meet us at the hospital. And now I have a PhD. I'm not the smartest person on the planet, but I'm fairly well educated. I'm somewhat intelligent. But in that one phone call, I just went stupid. I don't know what happened to me. It was like my brain just fried in that one phone call. And I just remember yelling, Lisa, the babies are coming. We've got to get to the hospital. And we just dropped everything. And we ran to the car, ran into the garage, jumped in the car. I realized I don't have my keys. Wait right here. And I ran back in the house, got my keys, came back, got in the car. I forgot my wallet. So wait right here. And I went back. It took 3 trips just to get out of the driveway. And we're starting to go down the road. And I look at the fuel gauge. It's right on empty. It's on fumes. We'll never make it to the hospital. I said, Lisa, we're going to have to stop and get gas. We'll never make it. She said, well, why did you let it get this empty? You should have kept it full. You should have filled it up ahead of time. I said, well, Lisa, this is ahead of time. They're 2 weeks early. I was going to do it today. I'm finally home on a weekend. And they came ahead of time. And so I said, well, I'll just get $5. That's it. Just enough to get us there. And, I can't stand paying 2 cents a gallon more than the station just down the street, But she's like, don't shop around. Like, the first place you come, I don't care if they're gouging you. 2 cents a gallon, we'll just splurge on the babies. Get the gas, let's keep going. So I swerve into the first place, get out of the car, and there's literally a cover over that gas nozzle. It's not working. We got to jump back in the car, pull up to another pump, get out there, $5. We race out of the gas station. I said, now Lisa, don't get upset with me, but we left so quickly. I haven't even had coffee yet. I haven't had breakfast. This could take a while for these babies to come. I said, and those poor babies, that their first sight of their favorite human being should not be me without coffee. Like, that will be a terrifying experience for those innocent eyes to, if they see me without coffee, they'll climb right back in the womb and say, we're not going out there, if that's what people on the outside look like. So I said, there's a McDonald's right there. We'll go through the drive-through. I said, I won't even come to a complete stop. I'll just drive slowly by the drive-thru and say, 2 coffees to go, we're having a baby, and maybe some oatmeal. And so I placed that order, and I let them know we're in a very big hurry, and they literally said, would you just pull over to that pickup area? It'll just take us a moment. We'll get you what you need. And I won't tell you what my beloved wife is saying to me at that point under her breath, but we're pulled over and we're waiting, and as soon as they came out, I just rev out of there. We race out onto the street. We're racing over to this hospital. I've never been to this hospital before, but I know generally where it is, and so I see the big H above the building. We're racing over there, and by this time, as we're pulling into the premises, my wife says, don't even park the car. She said, just drop me off at the front door. She said, those children are going to be in kindergarten before I see them at this point. And so
I swerve over, drop her off. She doesn't even look back. She just runs into the building. And so I'm trying to find a place to park. And all of a sudden, I see in the rearview mirror my wife waving like this. She comes back out of the building. She's flagging me down. And so I come back around, roll down my window. She says, "This is the wrong hospital." Like, we literally went to the wrong hospital. I don't know what happened to me. I'd never been like this before. The right hospital, this was an affiliate of the hospital we wanted, but they didn't do babies in this one. And so we go a mile and a half further down the road, and we pull in. At this point, I just decided I'm not going to give her a head start. It's my grandchildren too. So we parked the car. We both went in. We went up to the second floor where the maternity ward was. I race up to the desk where the nurse is. I said, "I'm Richard Blackaby. I'm the grandfather. Where do you need me?" And they looked at me and they said, "Well, in that waiting room right over there." I said, "Excuse me, you must not have heard me." I said, "I'm the grandfather." Where I assumed they'd want to gown me up and glove me up and have me in some strategic position. They said, "No, we want you in that waiting area right over there." I learned later that they have a much larger waiting area that normal people wait in, but they could tell I was going to be trouble, and so they sort of quarantined me back in this little cubbyhole area. And there's no one in there but me. My wife decided, why waste time there when there's a perfectly good gift shop just one floor below, so she's gone. And so just me in a 24-hour news channel on TV. And if you've watched, as most of you have, 24-hour news, you know what I was seeing. There's a terrorist that's just blown themselves up and 24 people at a wedding. And here's a shooting, and here's a crime, and here's a scandal, and here's racial divide. And here's this problem, and there's that problem, and this angry outburst, and so on. And for about 40 minutes, all I'm watching is just one negative news story after the next. And finally, after about 40 minutes, it dawns on me, that is the world that my two grandsons have lived in. That's the world they're going to have to navigate. So after about 40 minutes, they tell us, well, there's one of the grandsons, they were twins. One of them was back in his mother's room and available for handling now. So we made our way to the room, and I love my wife. I'm very kind and good to my wife. I take good care of her most of the time, but I have played a lot of sports where there's only one ball, and there's more than one person who wants that ball, and there was only one baby, and there was two grandparents, and so we're both like, "Oh, there's the grandchild," and I just sort of stepped right in front of her there, like she falls into a bedpan, and I make a dash for that first grandchild. I think all three grandsons, I was the first non-parent to hold. I was just shameless. I don't know what came over me. But I grabbed this child, and of course, any of us who've ever held babies, you look in this child's face, brand new baby, and you're looking at this innocent human being, and you wish you could see what's coming. You wish you could see what will become of this child. What will they be like as an adult? When will they know that God loves them? And when will they respond to that? And I'm holding this child. I've never had a grandchild before. I'm just looking intently at this child, but I'm remembering all the news stories I've seen. And it's just like I realized there's going to come a day when pornography is going to come spewing through the internet and the airwaves, seeking to just destroy his innocent heart and mind. And a day may come when he's in university or high school, and a science teacher is going to laugh at the very thought that there's a God who created the universe. And he may have friends one day who tease him and say, "Well, why won't you do that? Everybody does that." And when those moments come, as I'm looking at this little boy, knowing that day will come for this guy, I just felt like God said, "Then what kind of grandfather will this little boy need? So that when the world comes after him, that his grandfather becomes that spiritual anchor in his life that holds him in place. And the world tries to pull him into the darkness, but the godly prayers and influence, counsel of his grandfather holds him in place. And when his professor laughs and says, 'There is no God,' will that child say, 'But I've heard my grandfather talk to God. I know this.' And when his friends laugh at his moral stance, his Christian values, will that grandson say, 'But if my grandfather's a Christian, then I want to live like him.'" As I'm holding this child, as if God just said, by the way, those of you who are grandparents, it's different than being a parent, isn't it? Like, when you're a parent, you have control, you have power. You can take away their allowance. You can send them to your room. They can say you don't get dessert. As a grandparent, you don't have the same leverage. Really, the only leverage I've got is whenever I say something to my grandson, he looks at me and decides if he wants to do what I just said. And he's weighing it out. From what I know of Grandpa, do I want to take him seriously? Do I care what he's telling me right now? It's a different kind of leadership, where you don't have all the props. It's just who you are. And what God said to me is, God's a God of grace and truth. And in truth, God said, you're not yet that man. But then in grace, he said, but you could be. And so I began a journey. I tell you what, I just said, God, I want to be the man of God that will be a spiritual rock for these grandsons you've just given me. I've got, I can't, this monitor's not on, so I can't see. Is that showing me what I'm seeing? Now I become that obnoxious grandparent. I do bore people with pictures of my grandchildren now. This is the day that the middle one had just been born. That was number 3. His twin cousins had come to visit him on the day that he was born. And then this is just a picture of more recent one. I've got a 4th grandson now, but that picture I keep in my Bible. And this is the takeaway truth from this session. I just want you to underline and just realize. I keep this picture in my Bible, not just to, subject any innocent seatmate with a picture of my grandsons, but I keep it there because this reminds me that when I fail to grow, other people will suffer. I've always known that it would cost me not to grow. But when I look those boys in the face and realize if I don't become the man of God that God wants me to be, those boys are going to be the ones who pay the price. I have to grow. I had a young man come to me a little while ago. He said, well, Richard, my wife's the prayer in our family. She does the praying. And I don't know why, it just struck me. I guess I was in a bad mood. But I looked at the man and said, so you're telling me that every day your wife gets up early and prays for you and asks God to protect you and to bless you and to guide you and to counsel you. Is that what you're saying? He said, yeah, I'm the most fortunate man. I said, well, tell me something. Who prays for her? Who prays for her? I said, so every day you get interceded for by your spouse, but because you've just never been good at prayer, she's got to go it alone. I said, you know what? Prayer is not rocket science. You just have to decide, it's time I grew and learned how to pray. You've got all kinds of conferences. You can learn to pray anytime you want. You can set your alarm earlier, just like anybody else, if you really wanted to grow in that area of your life. But folks, everywhere I go, I have people shrugging their shoulders and saying, I've just never been good at that. I've never been good at witnessing. I've never been good at praying. I've never been good at serving. And so others will suffer because you never do. So I want to talk to you for a few moments about some people who learn the value, the need of growing. And Rick, I can't see them, so I'm going to just, you do that. I want you to look for a moment. I don't know if you have your Bibles or not. I'm going to read out of Matthew 17. Matthew 17, you know the context of this story. Jesus takes Peter, James, and John with him up onto the Mount of Transfiguration, but he doesn't take them all. And I've always been puzzled by that in one sense, because if it's the mountain that people think that it was, there was enough room for 12 disciples up there. But he only takes 3. He leaves 9 behind. And so these 9 go into the village nearby, and they're tasked with ministering while the other 3 are up having this glorious encounter with God on the mountain. So what happens is, apparently, a father with a boy who has an evil spirit comes upon him. And this boy, when the spirit comes upon him, the boy will fall into the fire, he'll fall into the water, he's in danger of drowning, he's in danger of being burned up and doing himself great harm. This father lives in fear all the time. But then one day he hears that 9 of Jesus' disciples are in the village. And they have cast out demons before. They've done miracles. And so he grabs his only child The Gospel of Luke tells us it's his only child. And he races to these 9 disciples, and he falls to his knees, and he begs them and says, please set my boy free. And they fail to do so. And so Jesus now has come down from the mountain. He's just reconnecting with those 9 disciples when we get to verse 14. And it says, when they reached the crowd, a man approached and knelt down before him. Lord, he said, have mercy on my son, because he has seizures and suffers terribly. He often falls into the fire and often into the water. I brought him to your disciples, but they couldn't heal him. Jesus replied, you unbelieving and perverse generation, how long will I be with you? How long must I put up with you? Bring him here to me. Then Jesus rebuked the demon, and it came out of him, and from that moment the boy was healed. Then the disciples approached Jesus privately and said, why couldn't we cast it out? Because of your little faith, he told them. For truly I tell you, if you have faith the size of a mustard seed, you will tell this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move. Nothing will be impossible to you. Now let me just say this. If you haven't experienced this yet, you will. There will inevitably come a moment in your life when you will get to the end of yourself. You may have been successful for years. You may have had the golden touch for years. And you may have, everything you put your hand to may have been successful. Every conflict that you had at work, you were able to bring it to resolve. Every time there was a problem, you may have been that person who was able to solve the problem. But there will come a day in your life where you will face something that you cannot fix. It may be a relationship. And you've always been able to get along with people. You've always had good people skills. But this broken relationship, no matter what you do, it just doesn't seem to be healed. Or this prodigal child in your life. He was such a sweet little boy when he was 6, but now he's 16 and he wants nothing to do with your God anymore. And no matter what you do, it doesn't seem to get any better. Or a financial situation, or a health situation. But there will come a day when you will face something that's bigger than you, that's impossible for you. And when you face that moment, you've got to decide to do one of 2 things. You either need to grow, and grow until you have the level of faith required to be successful. To grow to be more like Jesus so you can be used by God to have healing and victory. Or if you refuse to grow, then you may just go. You may quit. You may give up. And I'm afraid that that's what these 9 disciples have done. Do you notice when Jesus returns, none of those 9 disciples comes running up to him. Andrew doesn't come up and say, oh, good, you're back. Jesus, we got this really tough case over here. Matthew and Thomas are there now trying to help him out. We told him, don't go anywhere because we knew you'd be coming back. We told him before the day was done, we'd see victory over this little boy. None of those disciples say that, do they? Who brings this to Jesus' attention? The Father does, right? What did those disciples do? I mean, we don't know for... But do you notice how harsh Jesus is when he responds? Oh, faithless and unbelieving generation, perverse generation. When Jesus says, how long must I be with you? That's pretty harsh, is it not? Why? What would make Jesus be that upset? Well, I think Jesus looked and saw this boy writhing on the ground with an evil spirit. And there were those 9 of his disciples just shuffling off, saying, well, maybe we'll have more luck in the next one. You know, sometimes it just doesn't work out. We did the best that we could. Do you know what God has taught me? People don't need the best I can do. They need the best God can do. One time a father whose son was just completely off the rails came to my dad and said that very thing. He said, Henry, we did the best that we knew to do. My dad said, and that just might be the problem. You see, these disciples did all they knew to do. And if you go back to Matthew 10, you'll realize that Jesus had given them power over these evil spirits. And they had cast out evil spirits. It's not like they've never done this before. They had been successful in the past. Only apparently this case is unusually difficult. This one is tougher than any they faced before, and now they've hit a wall. And it appears that these 9 disciples just kind of wanted to walk away and say, hey, maybe tomorrow will be a better day. But you see, the problem is when you give up on a person, you've just given up on someone's child. And when the church, when God's people gives up on someone, it doesn't get any more hopeless than that, does it? Because everybody else may give up, but God's people can't give up. Because we know God, and we know what God's capable of. You see, if I were to go around the room and just survey you and ask you, how powerful is God? I suspect in a room like this, most of us would say, oh, he's all-powerful. He's almighty. He created the universe. He created life. But you see, I wouldn't, if I wanted to know how powerful you believe God is, I would not have to check out your theological statement. I'd not have to check your creed. You know what I'd have to do? I just have to find out what you have given up on or quit. Show me who you gave up on, and I'll tell you how big your God is. Show me a problem that you gave up on, and I'll know how big your God is. Because the moment you give up on someone, you've just declared, even God could not turn that person around. Even God could not fix this problem that I'm in. So I might as well just quit. I might as well give up. So the question I have for you tonight is, who have you given up on? What problem have you quit? Have you lost heart? Is there a face that comes to mind? Maybe someone you prayed for their salvation for 15 years. Every year you started a new prayer journal. Their name was in that prayer, but 15 years of prayer, they never came to Christ. So 2018 rolled around, you didn't even put their name back on the list. I mean, hey, 15 years, nothing happened. Let me just maybe create space for someone else that I'll have maybe more success with when I pray. Problems that maybe in your own personal life, there was an issue in your life that you knew was not honoring to God, and you used to really work at it. You tried, you made commitments and New Year's resolutions, but you always ended up back to the same place you'd always been, and finally you just kind of shrugged your shoulders and said, I guess this is just the way I'm always going to be. And you just announced, even Almighty God could not fix me. You declared by what you quit or gave up on that your God was not all-powerful. Now, I got to tell you that in my own life, I've been there. I'm not here to cast any stones. And I'll tell you this, I've been a leader all my life. When I was in high school, I was captain of sports teams. I've been the leader of church, I've been a leader of a school, been the leader of a nonprofit. I'm just kind of one of those natural leaders. Wherever I've been, I just end up leading. That's just what I do. I'm the firstborn of 5 kids. I'm just a typical oldest sibling profile. And I can tell you, over the course of my life, I've had many problems that came in my door. My academic dean came in and told me some things that let me know I was going to have to fire somebody. I had all kinds of problems come in my door, and I knew, okay, it's going to be ugly, it's going to be painful, but I know what I have to do. I don't say this to brag, but I cannot think of a problem I've ever dealt with at work that I did not have confidence we'd get an answer some way or other. I've never just thrown up my hands in my work life and said, it's impossible. The only time I've ever been at an absolute loss to know what to do as a leader has been in my own home. And I remember when I was the president of the seminary, I was with my leadership team, I was solving problems. That's what I did. That's what leaders do. We solve problems. I was solving one problem after another, meeting with teams, getting them all revved up and casting the vision and developing the staff and walking about, making sure the team is all, fired up and effective. And my phone rings, and it's my wife. She said, Daniel, my middle child, second son, was home, and he had declared he was not going to go back to school. He's 15. And he was going through some tough times in his life. He was struggling in just a number of ways. Not all of it his fault, but he was at the lowest point in his life. But you have to understand, this child has always had a tenuous relationship with school. When he was 6 years old, I got a call from my wife. He'd come home from school when he was 6. decided that was enough for him. He was in school, decided he'd rather play Nintendo in our basement instead. During the afternoon recess, he just cut out of school. And the teacher, after recess, she's halfway through her lesson and realizes she's a student short and panics, and they start searching the whole school grounds. They notify the police. They're calling our home, and no one knows where he is. He has to cross several really busy, uncontrolled intersections. Eventually, he shows up at our house. And so he just starts doing this on a regular basis. The only question is, will he escape in morning recess or afternoon recess? I find out there's a betting pool at the school of whether you're going to make a run for it in the morning or the afternoon. It's embarrassing when you think that you've raised the next Einstein, and then you realize, no, in fact, your child is on the elementary school's 10 most wanted list. And so we had experience with him then. Even in college, he just had this thing, like, the first day of class in college, you get your syllabus, and it tells you what your tests will be and what papers due and so on. Daniel would get a syllabus, and he would say, Dad, I've got 6 skips in this class. He would count how many skips he had. I would say, son, no, those are not skips. Those are excused absences. So, like, if you come down with pneumonia and you have to be put on an IV drip in intensive care, you can have an IV drip for 6 class periods and still pass the class and get credit for what I'm paying for. And he said, no, Dad, those are skips. If you don't use them in the semester, they're gone. It's like they never existed. He said, I couldn't look myself in the mirror, knowing I had 6 perfectly good skips, and I hadn't used them all. He went to school one time. He lived at home. He had a 45-minute drive to go to class every day. The last day of class one semester, drove 45 minutes, and on the way realized he actually had one more skip in that class. And so even though the professor is telling the students what will be on the final exam, he sat in his car just so he could say, I started this class with 6 skips, and I've used all 6. That one time, my daughter is 2 years younger than him. She had the same major, so she'd fall about 2 years behind him. So I would always tell her every new semester, go into your brother Daniel's room, check his textbooks, and see if he's got any textbooks that you need, so you can save your poor, impoverished dad a bit of money on buying more textbooks. I remember one semester she came out all excited. She said, Dad, you'll be happy to know I found 3 textbooks in Daniel's room that I need for my classes. I said, that's great. She said, yeah, and they're still in the shrink wrap. Lord, help me with this boy. What will it take? So he hits this low point in his life, and he says, I'm not going back to school. I'm done. And you maybe you've been there, maybe you haven't. But I'm doing important stuff at work. And the last thing I need to do is go home and convince my 15-year-old that he will indeed keep going to school. So I thought, well, okay, but I'm spot. I'll fix this. Have you ever tried to fix your kids? I had a person one time tell me all the things they were doing to fix their kids. I said, it sounds like you're putting a lot of work into raising your kid. I said, are you enjoying your kid? So a lot of Christians, we worry way more about enjoying our raising our kids and enjoying them. And I thought I'm going to have to go raise that kid today. So I come racing home, and I've had success my whole life. Everything I've ever led has prospered. And so okay, how hard can it be to talk a 15-year-old into going back to school? So I thought, okay, I'll put on the charm. That always works. I mean, when I can cool down a troubled situation, the guy's really hot, and I can go in there and just kind of chill him out. And so I walk into my son's room. Hey, Daniel, I understand you're going through kind of a rough day today. Well, we all do that. That's okay. We can work that out. Like, it's no big deal. Like, tomorrow will be another day. Well, let's just talk about it. But he's not buying it. He's just like tuning me up. So I thought, well, okay, I'll go into my problem solving mode. That always works. So I said, well, Daniel, I understand you've got some problems. Well, hey, that's what I do. I solve problems for a living. So this is your lucky day. Let's just put all your problems on the table and we'll work it out. It shouldn't be that hard. I've dealt with a lot bigger stuff than this. It may seem tough, but believe me, we'll get it all figured out. But he doesn't want me to solve him. And so I thought, well, maybe I need to put a little fear into him. So let me just kind of describe to him what it'll be like as a 15-year-old high school dropout, because he's not going to live at home the rest of his life. So let me clear up a few misconceptions he might have about what life will be like if he doesn't continue going to school.
he doesn't care. I can't scare him. He's just like, fine, bring it on. He's not going back to school. So finally, I don't know what else to do. So I just shamelessly tried to bribe him. Like, how much money do I have to give you to get you back in school? I discovered he can't be bought. He's not going back to school. So I had to finally pull out the old Trump card that fathers have to use now and then. I said, well, you will go back to school because I'm your father, and I said you'll go back to school. And I walked out the door, closed the door, and as I'm walking in my bedroom, I realized that was the sorriest demonstration of parenting I think I've ever done in my life. I know full well that son wants nothing to do with me. He doesn't want to hear me. He doesn't care what I think. He just doesn't want to be around me, and he doesn't want to go back to school. And I remember walking into my bedroom, and I remember leaning up against the wall of my bedroom, and I just cried out to God. And I just said, God, what does that child need? And you see, the problem with asking God a question is you have to be prepared for his answer. And what God said is he needs a different father. Because the father he has right now is not getting the job done. And you just keep fathering him the way you have been, you'll keep getting the same results. You see, too often when I prayed, what I prayed is, God, would you fix that person? Fix that person, God. Fix my son. Fix my daughter. And God says, well, while I'm talking to you, let me make some adjustments in you. Because if he had a different father, there'd be different results. And the fact is, you just want to get it fixed so you can get back to what is more important to you right now, which is your job, your work, your success. And so I remember at that point just crying out to God and saying, God, do whatever you have to do in my life. But I'm the only father that child has. And if I blow it, if I just shrug my shoulders and say, well, that's the only kind of dad I know how to be. I've always fathered this way. See, my first son took after me. He had my temperament. And so, you see, God he can really get you kind of messed up sometimes when your first child is a well-behaved, easy-to-manage child, Because you actually think that it's because you're a good parent. And then he gives you child number 2, and you realize you're a total failure as a parent. That's what happened to me. It's like, everything I did the first time seemed to work. And, you want to grab that second child and say, why can't you be like your brother? And God said, you're the one who's got to change. And so I literally took everything that had worked with my first child, put it aside, and said, God, teach me how to be a dad all over again. And God just had to rebuild. I did stuff with that second child I never dreamed to do it with the first child. I mean, I did stuff that went totally against my nature, my instincts. God just kept saying, trust me, just do that, don't do that. And I could tell you a much longer version of what it took to get that child where he is. He's the one that called me that day and said, Dad, your twin grandsons are on the way. And that son said, the first person he called, the first person he wanted to let know, I want to share the greatest moment of my life with you, Dad. I just thought to myself driving there, God, thank you that you didn't leave me where I was. Because if I was still that old, Father, I would have read about it somewhere on Facebook later, that my son was having twins. He wouldn't have been calling me. And can I just tell you this, to the grace of God and to a wonderful mother this child has, this semester, that son is going to be turning in a dissertation and earning a PhD in apologetics and all things. He wants to be a college professor. And I've just prayed that God will give him some students in his classes, just like what he was. Because I know God is just. By the way, that child is so funny because when his wife is first expecting, she adores my son Daniel. God just perfectly created her for him. But she said, but Richard, I'll just be honest with you, I'm praying for a daughter, she said. I'm praying for a daughter. Because I've heard what my husband was like when he was a child, so I'm praying for a girl, praying for a girl. And I said, Sarah, I'm worried because God is a just God. And he is going to give Daniel exactly what he deserves. And of course, he didn't get a girl, he got twin boys. And I just thought, it is a fearful thing to fall into the hands of a righteous God. I'll tell you that. Can I just tell you this? Some of you, I know some of you, and there's some wonderful, wonderful saints in this room. prayer warriors. If I was in trouble, there's people in this room I'd want to be, right away, I'd want them to be praying for me. There are people who have been such a blessing for the kingdom of God. But can I tell you this? Every person in this room could go deeper with God. Our prayer life could be more powerful than it is. Our faith could still be greater than it is. We could be moving bigger mountains than we have been. There's more. And folks, I'll tell you something. If God's got it for you, you don't want to leave it on the table. You don't want to get to the end of your life and realize God had a whole bunch more, and you never picked it up off the table. And if it was only you that suffered, then you deserve what you got. But folks, your grandkids, your kids, your staff, your colleagues, people in your church, they don't deserve to suffer because you chose not to grow. Or maybe you grew 20 years ago. Maybe you were on fire and used to have awesome quiet times, but lately you've been the same Christian, praying the same prayers, doing the same things. Folks, have you looked at the news lately in America? America doesn't need Christians doing the same things they've always done. America needs the church to go to another level, to be more men and women of God than they've ever been. It's not enough what you did 10 years ago. America needs you to go to a deeper place with God than you've ever been before. It desperately needs the church to not stay where it has been. In 2001, I wrote a book, Spiritual Leadership, with my father. And when I wrote it, my dad is the greatest man of God that I know. And so writing this book with him was an awesome privilege. And soon after we wrote the book, we were invited to do a leadership conference to teach the book in Miami, Florida. And there were about 2,500 people, 2,500 pastors and church leaders who all came to this convention center. And of course, everybody was there to hear my dad. Nobody was there to hear me. I was just the warm-up act. I just kind of got things started. And then my dad got up, and most of the people in the room, he was a spiritual hero to these people. So they all want to hear what he has to say. And so I'm sharing, the dad would get up, and it was glorious. But on Saturday night was the last session. And my dad has always been a very humble person. He said, Richard, I've been listening to you speak in these conferences, and he said, God's really speaking to you. And he said, I really feel that tonight you need just to have all the time that you need to unpack what God's put on your heart. So he said, I'm going to flip things around. I'm going to speak first, and I'm only going to take 10 minutes, and I'm going to stop and give you most of my time, and I want you just to share what God's put on your heart. And then I want you to extend an altar call and invite people to come forward and draw closer to God than they've ever been. And I had all kinds of problems with what my father had just told me. I said, Dad, this is Saturday night. There's 2,500 pastors out there. Like, as soon as they figure out that you had your last talk, they're not going to stay to hear me. They're just going to leave, and because they've got church the next day. And not only that, but most of these 2,500 pastors have been pastors longer than I have been. And so for me to tell these seasoned veterans, some of these people, church leaders for 40 years, and tell them that they need to draw closer to God, that their prayer life needs to go deeper, that their faith in God needs to be deeper. How am I going to tell them that? Like, Dad, I'm just a young whippersnapper compared to most of these guys. I said, I can't do that. But what I didn't say to him is, Dad, you're the greatest man of God I know. How do I have the greatest man of God I know sitting on the front row and then say, you all need to get closer to God? Like, that would just be really difficult to do. But my dad insisted. He said, that's what I want you to do. So we did. When we get to the altar call, and I feel very insecure. A lot of these guys have been in the trenches for many, many years. But I said, folks, God says if you draw near to him, he'll draw near to you. And I know many of you have had a great walk with God, but I'm telling you, God still has more. Why would you ever be content to stay where you are when you know God's got more for you? How could you just say, this is the way I've always been, when you know God wants you to be more than what you are right now? I said, so we're going to have the music's going to play. I said, there's this big platform here, and I want to invite you just to get out of your comfortable seat where you're sitting right now and just get a little uncomfortable for a moment before God and say, God, whatever you have to do, but don't leave me the same person I was when I came here this morning. And so I said, let's sing. But to be honest with you, I didn't think anybody was going to come. People were kind of looking at their watches like, well, we're about done here. I've got to get home and still put a sermon together for tomorrow morning. But we got to have at least an obligatory 2 verses before we can dismiss the prayer. So we're seeing the first verse, and sure enough, nobody is moving. Everybody kind of knows we're at the end of a conference, and it's been good, but it's time to get going. And so nobody's moved. And I'm just kind of, okay, there's verse 1. We'll get to verse 2, and then we'll all go home. And then I realized, it's a big auditorium, the platform kind of curves around, and I'm kind of standing over to the left, but I realized I sense some movement to my right. And I figure it's just the janitor starting to move the furniture and chairs back so they can go home. It's like, it's clear nothing more is going to happen there tonight, so they might as well stack the chairs so they can go home too. And so I kind of furtively just kind of glance over to see, what's going on over here. And I realized that over there to the edge of the platform is just one person. There's one man is coming, only out of 2,500 people. There's only one person, and this man is on his knees and he's just praying fervently. And just praying sincerely to God. And that one man is my father. And I just kind of double take. And I remember very vividly thinking to myself, that is the greatest man of God that I know. What is he doing coming forward? And I'll never forget, God just quietly said, Richard, that's why he is the greatest man of God you know. Because every time there's an opportunity to draw just a little closer to God, he's always the first man on his knees. And he doesn't care what anybody thinks. He doesn't care how it looks. He doesn't care how uncomfortable it is. He has a chance to get closer to God in that moment than he's ever been in his life. And he's going for it. He's going there. Well, people began noticing that, because everybody revered my dad in that room, and they realized he's on his knees and they're not. And it was just like the Spirit of God just suddenly convicted that whole room. Everybody's thinking, if Henry Blackaby's on his knees saying, oh, God, do a greater work in my life, why am I not on my knees praying that same prayer? And pastors began just flooding to the front. I mean, hundreds of pastors. I saw pastors lying on the ground, on their faces in the carpet, crying out to God because of their hardness of heart, their pride, their spiritual lethargy. They've just been willing to let an opportunity pass and just get on with the work at hand. I saw pastors back in parts of the seating area. I saw one pastor had about 10 of his church leaders with him, and he was sobbing and apologizing to his leaders because he had not been the pastor that they deserved him to be. And he just said, pray for me that I be the man of God that you need me to be as your pastor. And revival broke out. I ran into someone just the other day who said that was the most, just remembering, he was in that meeting, just saying how powerful it was. When one person said, God, if you got it, I want it. I can't stay where I am. I've got children. I've got a wife. I've got grandkids. I can't keep being the same person I've been. My prayers have got to have more impact today than they've ever had in times past. The influence of my life, my godly character, my Christ-likeness, it's got to be more like Jesus than I've ever been in my life, because there's just too much at stake. Well, can I just challenge you tonight? How long have you been the Christian you are tonight? If I were to get a tape recording of your prayer this morning, and get a tape recording of your talking to God 10 years ago, would there be any difference? Would there be any more depth today than there was 10 years ago? If I just watched how you treated your employees, after 10 years of walking with Jesus, should you be treating your employees the same way you were 10 years ago? If I looked to see what you were trusting God for, what your faith was claiming of God today, ought your faith not to be greater today than it was 10 years ago? But I'll tell you, sometimes we just stay in the same place for a long time. And while we stay in the same place, it doesn't mean you're not doing some good things. It just means that you're robbing people of what you could have been doing if you'd gone with God to a deeper place. That's why tonight I just want to challenge you that that's kind of been the journey that I've been on. Tomorrow I'll just share some more of that journey and some things God's been pressing on my heart. But I want to just challenge you tonight, not to condemn anyone, but to say, tonight everyone in this room has an open invitation to go closer to God, deeper into God than you've ever gone in your life. Why would you want to stay where you are when you've got that kind of invitation staring you in the face? Let me just pray with you for a moment, and I'll be done. Lord, I thank you for these people. I know a number of them. I know their hearts. I know you've used them mightily. You've done so many good things through their life. You've blessed so many people. But Lord, sometimes I just wonder what you could have done had we been willing to keep growing. Had we been willing to just earnestly keep pushing forward with you to those deep places of prayer, those deep places of faith, where we trust you for things almost too great even to mention. But Lord, we don't want to be the same Christians we've always been, because it costs people for us to stay where we are. It costs people. It doesn't just cost us. Lord, we would deserve it to cost us if we weren't willing to grow, but it shouldn't cost my grandkids, because I became spiritually lazy and just settled in to being the same person I'd been for years. And so, God, I pray for each of us that tonight you create within us a holy dissatisfaction to stay in the same place any longer. Would you create a hunger within us that would drive us to want to get up earlier than we've been getting up in recent days, to stay longer before your word, to stay longer on our knees, just desperate, Lord, to become all that you've always wanted us to be. And Lord, if there's someone tonight in our life for whom we've given up, Lord, we used to reach out to them. We used to pray sincerely for them. We used to believe that you were going to work in their life, but after all these years, Lord, we just quietly acted like those 9 disciples and just wanted to walk away and just give up. Lord, forgive us for anyone or anything we've given up on. Lord, it declared that we did not believe that you were powerful enough to do a work in their life. And so, God, forgive us if there's someone or something in our life we quit trusting you for. And I pray you rekindle in us a belief that with God all things are possible. And I pray, Lord, in the days to come that we'll see things happening in our life, in our businesses, in our churches, in our families, that, Lord, we've dreamed of, we've prayed for, and now we finally see the victory. So thank you for these, Lord. I pray even tonight, I pray even as we leave tonight already, there'd be a stirring in our soul, and we would just have a holy anticipation that something magnificent is on its way. Because we're not the same people we were even when we got up this morning. Thanks to God and his grace, who loves us too much to leave us where we are. And I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.